CNN.
Closing bell ringing on Wall Street. Coca-Cola ringing the closing bell. Not quite sure why. The stock exchange doesn't say what the honour is. It's to do with global transformations or something similar. But Coke ringing the closing bell. One. Good, solid fizz. I think we'll call it a fizzy gavel. For Tuesday, it's August the 14th. Tonight, Turkey versus US tech. President Erdogan is calling for a boycott of Apple. Tinder's co-founder is suing his own bosses. Our exclusive interview on what's gone wrong, and we'll talk to Sean Reid. And Tesla's board says not so fast. It's still not ready to approve going private. I'm Richard Quest, live tonight in London, where, of course, I mean business. Appropriate that I'm in Europe because most of the breaking news tonight comes from this side of the Atlantic. We begin with breaking news from northern Italy, where rescuers in Genoa are scrambling through the rubble of a massive bridge collapse. At least 23 people are dead, dozens are injured, and the number of people who've died is expected to rise as the search continues. The bridge crumbled in a violent storm. In doing so, at least 30 vehicles, including several heavy trucks, plunged from the high bridge and the highway that connects Italy to France. Genoa's mayor says the collapse was, in his words, not absolutely unexpected, which makes one to wonder what he meant. The bridge dates back to the 1960s and was undergoing maintenance. We'll catch up with the latest details from Nick Robertson, who's in Genoa, in just a moment. First, let's watch and listen to his report as he sets the scene at the bridge.
The rescue effort has been going on all afternoon. Rescue vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, police vehicles lined up at the side of the road. And you can see where the bridge just sheared off, debris hanging from the side there. And at the other end of the bridge, several hundred yards away, that truck just close to the drop-off, a driver there who had a hugely lucky escape. The road was busy, nose-to-tail traffic, torrential rain, thunder and lightning, water washing down the road. The bridge itself had road signs showing road repairs at this time. No indication yet why it actually collapsed. Dozens of vehicles feared to have careened off down into this valley here. It spans the canal and several rail lines linking to the port. This, of course, a tremendously busy highway at a very, very busy time of year. National holidays in Italy, national holidays in nearby France. This, the main highway that connects along the Mediterranean, France and Italy. A very busy day, a terrible, terrible tragedy for this city.
Nick Robertson, much to talk about, but please update me on the number of dead. I realise, of course, that it's going to change. We thought it was in the 30s, and the Prime Minister revised it down. Now it's creeping up again. Do they believe there are many more bodies to be found?
The expectation here seems to be that there are potentially more bodies to be found, that there are potentially more vehicles underneath all that rubble. The recovery effort continues into the night. There are sections of the crumpled concrete are illuminated by huge searchlights. You can hear the occasional sound of a mechanical digger in that area, although a lot of the heavy lifting equipment we've seen as dusk fell, that heavy lifting equipment was brought away. It rather gives the impression that this is really recovery, not rescue, and that whomever may be under that rubble, sadly, it is not a positive outcome.
Nick, I referred in the introduction earlier to the comment from the Genoa mayor that said this was absolutely not unexpected. Do we know what he meant by that?
He said that it was his responsibility as mayor to keep the city functioning, and the government's responsibility to provide the financial wherewithal to keep the country's infrastructure running. It smelled a little bit of a whiff of political differences there. But I think at this stage it really is hard to say. But what's very clear is, even at this very early stage, the state of repair or disrepair of that bridge, particularly when you talk to locals here who feel that it's been in a state of disrepair for too long, that is going to be central to this investigation. But the mayor seemed to imply from his whole sentence when he spoke there, that there were issues about the maintenance and the payment and the upkeep of this bridge.
Nick, thank you. Nick Robertson in Genoa tonight. And so to Turkey, where the president's vowing to boycott all electronics made in the United States. He did so as the lira was stabilizing, which is still down 40% on the year. In the face of Donald Trump's tariffs, President Erdogan says Turkey doesn't need any American imports.
We will produce every product we are importing from abroad with foreign currency here, and we will be the ones exporting these products. We will impose a boycott on U.S. electronic products. If they have iPhones, there is Samsung on the other side.
And he didn't just recommend Samsung as an alternative. He also suggested the Vestel Venus, which is a Turkish-made smartphone. Though even he does persuade, if he does persuade the Turks to give up their iPhones, a tech boycott won't be easy. Now, let's just take this so-called Vestel Venus 5000. That runs on Android software. Who makes Android or who owns Android? It's made by Google, although it is open source. Then there's the Venus V5. That runs using American Qualcomm chips. So it remains to be seen if President Erdogan will even impose an official boycott or if even the ordinary Turks are worried.
I am thinking the dollar rises because this country has not been governed. The economy is managed badly. Because of that, the dollar rises.
I think Turkish government does not know about economy because there are no real economists within the government. The administration is based on family relations.
John Defteris is now on the ground in Istanbul, joins me now. This idea of a boycott of American technology, it's politics and it's hyperbole. It doesn't stand much chance of reality.
Yeah, in fact, Richard, they had major cross currents today. The first rally in the lira in 3 days, and you have the hard line from President Erdogan calling for the boycott. And this was followed up by his son-in-law, now finance minister, taking a swipe at the dollar at the same time. He's suggesting, even though the dollar is rising, it's starting to lose its luster and that role as the reserve currency. He spoke at the 17th anniversary of the party his father-in-law founded, the AK Party, today in Ankara. Let's take a listen.
The dollar has lost its credibility. We will ensure that steps will be taken to continue to do business with our own money. We will see that our Turkish lira will strengthen. If one country's economy does not overcome the difficulty that it faces, it will have a butterfly effect, and this has the potential to shake all global trade, foremost in Europe.
And a little bit of a threat there, Richard, saying if we don't solve this problem in Turkey, which represents 1% of global GDP, it could particularly spill over to Europe right now because of the exposure of the European banks, of course, to Turkey, about $150 billion. No word on interest rates, no word about the International Monetary Fund. The finance minister following the line of the president saying, we'll tough it out on our own.
And isn't that the problem? Because even if they do attempt to tough it out on their own, the underlying economics are against them. And as we've talked about on this program last week, that is the biggest issue. They have a balance of account that they can no longer be sustained. They've got a falling currency. They have very high inflation. That's the problem.
And Richard, this is a problem that's been surfacing for the last 2 years, and President Erdogan thinks he can ride it all out on his own. $57 billion current account deficits, what you're referring to, inflation nearly at 16%. And I'm starting to think about this as the sleeper event that could creep up on emerging markets because of the vulnerability of Turkey. But there's 5 other emerging markets that have been identified, and we've seen the initial contagion of this with Russia and the South African rand losing 10%. But we have 30 emerging markets analyzed by the Institute of International Finance suggesting that their overall debt to GDP is running at 200%. It's creeped up since the last financial crisis, Richard. So we have to watch this carefully and find a common ground, not have the arguments between Trump and Erdogan where we are today.
John Defterios in Istanbul tonight, thank you. And while reminding Turkey is that US that political risks are very real in this economy, the sun is shining on the German economy. GDP is up 0.5% on the last quarter. It beat estimates, and it shrugs off Trump and trade fears. Carsten Brzezinski is in Frankfurt, the chief economist at ING Germany. These numbers, taken on the back of the US numbers, are also good. But if we look at the rest of the Eurozone, we know there that there has been a slowdown. So is Germany once again having to do all the heavy lifting?
Well, together with the Netherlands right now, because the Dutch also outperformed the rest of the Eurozone. But yes, I think Germany remains the powerhouse of the Eurozone. And normally you would have expected the other countries actually to overtake the German growth numbers. They haven't. So actually it's still up on the German shoulders to push on the Eurozone recovery.
Now, of course, Europe and the Union reports quarter on quarter as opposed to annualized, which always makes it difficult when you see a 0.5% versus a 4.1 or 4.2%. What do you expect in Germany will grow in 2019?
Yeah, I think for the rest of this year and also for 2019, I'm expecting Germany to grow at around 2%, which is not the 4% you see in the US right now, but which is solid and which is actually more than the so-called potential growth rate of the German economy, because Germany currently is really benefiting from low interest rates, the ECB's monetary policy, strong domestic demand, and then everything above 2% would depend on how the entire trade tensions will play out. Will we get a trade war between the US and the EU? Then you would also have to revise downwards German growth numbers. If we won't get it, I think Germany could end up with anything north of 2% over the next couple of years.
And at the moment, it's too difficult or uncertain to factor in the trade tariffs. The effect at the moment we know, but the longer term effect, if the situation gets worse, can't be accounted for yet.
No, exactly. I think that's also what these second quarter GDP numbers showed. Right now, we only have a kind of confidence impact on the German economy, which is extremely small. And because the only tariffs that are there are on aluminium and on steel. That's everything. So therefore, if we would get a negative sentiment loop in the next couple of months, yes, it could leave its marks on the German, also the European economy. But right now, and that is the interesting, right now, all these trade tensions have not had any impact, any significant impact on the entire Eurozone.
In terms of Angela Merkel, with this sort of economic performance, does it take the pressure off her? Under huge, enormous pressure because of migration and the internal disputes within her coalition. But does it take that pressure off that the economy is doing so well?
Somehow, not entirely, because the funny thing right now is when you look at the numbers, so Germany is almost enjoying a golden decade. So they now go into the 10th year of almost consecutive growth. Never ever before had so many people a job. Wages are increasing, the economy is really booming, but somehow most people do not feel as if they are in the middle of an extremely booming economy. So therefore other issues like migration, like integrating the refugees, but also like the lack of structural reforms, clearly running behind in terms of digitalization, is also feeding into this entire political debate right now in Germany. So therefore, I'm afraid that the strong economic numbers do not really take the pressure off Mrs. Merkel.
Right, but because in your role as chief economist, if you look at the whole Eurozone and you put it into that wider context, the ability of the Eurozone, do you feel that they have put in place sufficient fiscal macroprudential measures that obviously it's safer than it was in 2008, 2009. But what about things like fiscal deficits? What about the way they run it on an annual basis?
I think this is, you're right, touched the most sensitive point right now. I think what the Eurozone does need as a whole is more investment. More investment always is contradicting the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact, namely not running fiscal deficits. I think Germany is the best example. So Germany is running a fiscal surplus. At the same time, there's a high need for further investments to maintain the strong role of Germany in the European and global economy. So therefore, I think European politicians, yes, they have made the Eurozone, the monetary union, much more crisis-resistant, but to go ahead, they would need to open more possibilities for investments.
Good to see you, sir. Thank you for the perspective. Please, you always have an invitation to come and talk here on Crestvies Business. Thank you. As we look at European stock markets, which finished the day mostly flat, bank stocks remained under pressure. UK unemployment fell to a 43-year low. And the Dow was in triple digits higher, with the S&P snapping a 4-day losing streak. The Tapestry. Now, Tapestry, I always feel the need when you mention these companies like Tapestry, which, of course, is the old Coach. It still has Coach as part of it, but it's now called Tapestry, had strong earnings, boosting other consumer stocks. As we continue tonight, taking a swipe at Tinder, the co-founders of the dating site say they've been stood up for billions of dollars.